Hello and welcome. If you're listening to this, thank you for being here. Before we get into today's topic, I thought I would take a moment to introduce myself because this is the very first episode of this podcast. I am a 27-year-old turning 28 this year, and if I'm being completely honest, I'm still figuring things out. Actually, I think that's probably the reason this podcast even exists. Like a lot of people my age, I'm trying to navigate life one step at a time. Some days I feel like I know exactly what I'm doing, and on the other days, I realize I absolutely have no idea. And I think both these things can be true at the same time. This channel is going to be a collection of conversations about life as I'm living it, not as an expert, not as someone who has all the answers, but as someone who is learning along the way. We will talk about money, investments, we'll talk about career and work life, we'll talk about travel and experiences that change the way you see the world or we see the world. We'll talk about confidence, relationship, personal growth, mistakes, successes, and all the little lessons that come with simply growing older. Basically, if I'm learning something, questioning something, struggling with something, or I'm excited about something, there's a good chance we will talk about it here. Because one thing I have realized is that most of us are figuring things out as we go. And sometimes it helps to know that you're not the only one. So, whether you're here for the first episode or you have somehow stumbled upon this podcast months or years from now, I'm glad you're here. Now, with that introduction out of the way, let's talk about today's topic. Nobody taught me about investing. And if you have ever felt confused by words like mutual funds, stocks, SIPs, or compounding, trust me, you're not alone. Now, maybe someone explained it to me once, maybe I read an article here and there, but if you had asked me a year ago how investing works, I probably would have stared at your face for a few seconds and then changed the topic. Because honestly, money always feels complicated. It feels like one of those things that everyone else somehow understood except for me. Whenever I heard words like mutual funds, stocks, SIPs, compounding, or asset allocations, my brain would immediately decide that this conversation wasn't for me. And maybe some of you feel the same way. For the longest time, my relationship with money was pretty simple: earn money, save money, try not to spend too much, which I failed in all the time. That was the entire plan. And to be fair, saving is important, but recently I realized that saving and growing money are not exactly the same thing. That's when I started questioning, not because I suddenly wanted to become a financial expert, not because I wanted to spend all day looking at stock charts, but because I wanted to understand what was happening with my own money. I wanted to stop feeling confused every time someone talked about investing. So, over the past few weeks, I have been teaching myself slowly, very imperfectly, and I have learned something interesting. The hardest part wasn't understanding investment, the hardest part was getting over the feeling that I was already behind. Maybe you have felt that too. You hear people talking about investing since they were 21. You see videos about building wealth. You hear stories about people who started years ago, and suddenly it feels like you have missed some important train. But the more I learn, the more I realize that feeling behind doesn't actually help. Starting late is still starting, and that's better than spending another 5 years feeling intimidated. One of the biggest things I have learned so far is that investing isn't really about becoming rich overnight. I know that's obvious, but social media sometimes makes it seem like everyone is doubling their money every week. The reality is much less dramatic, and honestly, that's comforting. What I have been learning in this investing journey is more about consistency. A bit by bit, a little today, a little bit next month, and then repeating the process for years. It's not exciting, it's definitely not glamorous, but it feels that somewhere it makes sense. Another thing I've realized is that I don't need to understand everything before I begin learning. I used to think I need to read around 10 books, watch 50 videos, and become an expert before I could even think about investing. Now I'm realizing that learning can happen while you are moving forward. You don't need a finance degree, you just need curiosity. And that's really what this episode is about. I'm not here to teach you about how to invest, at least not today. I'm still learning myself. What I do want to do is create a space where we can talk about things that many of us are figuring out as adults: money, career, travel, relationships, confidence, mistakes that nobody really gives a handbook for. So, if you are someone who's trying to figure things out, welcome. You are in a good company. And if you ever felt embarrassed because there are things you think you should know by now, I hope this reminds you that learning has no deadline. We are all beginners at something. Anyways, that's what I have been thinking for this week. If you are watching me on YouTube, then I would love to know your answer to this question. What's one thing you wish someone taught you earlier about money? Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.